The Council of Nicaea had nothing to do with the New Testament. I'm going to say that again. The Council of Nicaea had nothing to do with the New Testament. This is one of the most pervasive myths about the Council of Nicaea, that Emperor Constantine called the council to vote on which books should be in the Bible and which ones should be rejected. But I'm going to tell you that this is almost certainly not true. The Council of Nicaea met from May to July of 325 CE, and we actually know what was discussed there. The Council of Nicaea was called by Emperor Constantine to help settle a theological dispute about Jesus Christ, and had arose because of a clergyman by the name of Arius. Arius argued that Jesus must have been a lesser being created by God. Only God alone could be infinite, eternal, and all-powerful. And this caused some problems. You see, most Christians during this time did believe that Jesus was somehow divine, but the nature of this divinity was not yet decided. Did God create Jesus? Was Jesus God himself? Or did Jesus' existence stretch back into eternity with God? Well, to make a long story short, most of the bishops disagreed with Arius, and they decided that Jesus is of the same substance and co-eternal with God. And at the Council of Nicaea, the bishops decided to officially denounce Arius and to draft an orthodox statement on the nature of Jesus' divinity. Jesus was begotten, not made, of one substance with the Father. A line from the Nicene Creed that many Christians recite even today. You might say, but Andrew, how do we know this? How do we know they don't talk about the New Testament canon? Well, when it comes to ancient history, it's very rare that we can be 100% certain about anything. But all of our historical sources say that the Council of Nicaea was about the Arian controversy, and they say nothing about a controversy about which books should go into the New Testament. We should first of all say that there are no stenographic records from the Council of Nicaea. Just like in a modern courtroom when someone feverishly types down everything being said, the Greeks and Romans were extremely skilled at shorthand writing, and they probably had a scribe or several scribes present at the Nicene Council. But if these documents ever existed, they have long since been lost to time. But we do have some authors that were present there at the council and people that wrote about it shortly after. First of all, let's start with the Bishop Theodoret and the Bishop Gelasius, two early Christian historians who wrote about what went down at the Council of Nicaea. Both of these authors say that the Council of Nicaea published 20 decrees, or what are called canon laws, and Gelasius actually records them. These 20 decrees talk about a variety of issues, specifically about the hierarchy of church authority and clergymen. Law number 3, for example, forbids any clergyman from living with a woman, except for his mother, sister, or aunt. Law 15 forbids any clergyman from bouncing between jobs at different churches in different regions. And law number 20 decrees that everyone should stand during prayer on Sundays instead of kneeling. Go read all 20 laws for yourself. I'm including a link in the description below. You'll notice that some are pretty random and are obviously dealing with local problems that were a big deal in the 4th century. But you guessed it, none of these 20 laws say anything about a dispute about which books should go in the Bible. You would think in the officially published 20 decrees of the Council of Nicaea they would have mentioned this. We should also include the testimony of Theodoret, who records a letter drafted by the Council of Nicaea. I'm also including a link to this in the description. You should go read it. Basically, this is a letter written to the churches of North Africa condemning Arius. The impious doctrines of Arius were investigated before our most religious emperor Constantine, and his impiety was unanimously anathematized, which is a fancy way of saying cursed or condemned. Theodoret also includes a letter that supposedly is by Emperor Constantine himself, and Constantine does talk about a debate that happened at the Council of Nicaea. Except this is a debate about what day we should celebrate Easter on. Nothing about the biblical canon. Notice how neither of these letters, the one supposedly written by the council itself and the one supposedly written by Constantine, say anything about a biblical debate. Nor do sources closer to the fact, Eusebius and Athanasius, mention anything about a New Testament debate. Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, attended the council. He was there, in the room, and he wrote a text about it called Concerning the Decrees of the Council of Nicaea, De Decretis for short. And nowhere in this text does he talk about a discussion that went down about the New Testament. Nowhere in this text does he talk about a debate about which books should go in the Bible or which ones should not. But he does go into very deep detail about why Arius is definitely a heretic. Check it out. Once again, I'm including this source in the description below. Go read it for yourself. It will only take you about 30 minutes. Athanasius does eventually publish an official list of what he considers the New Testament. He does this in the very creatively named Festal Letter number 39, but he doesn't mention anything about the Council of Nicaea, which you think he would have done if this was such an authoritative council on the New Testament. And finally, Eusebius of Caesarea, the famous church historian of the 4th century, was also present in the room at the Council of Nicaea. And again, he doesn't mention anything about a New Testament debate, but he says a lot about the Arian controversy. So why do people think that the Council of Nicaea decided on the New Testament? Well, apparently this rumor is very ancient, and here is where this video gets more complicated. If this wasn't the case, this would have been a 3-minute video, very simple, but there is one small mention from an ancient source that might imply that the Council of Nicaea possibly talked about the New Testament. But I'm going to argue that this is recording a rumor and not actual historical events. And you'll see why soon. So this text comes from St. Jerome. Jerome famously translated the Bible into Latin, a version called the Vulgate Bible. Before every book of the Bible, Jerome wrote a little preface, explaining the book, giving a synopsis, writing what it's all about. When writing the introduction to the book of Judith, which is a Jewish text from the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, Jerome seems to suggest that this book shouldn't be in the Bible. But because this book is found by the Nicene Council to have been counted among the number of the sacred scriptures, I have acquiesced to your request. Indeed, a demand. I have given to this book one short night's work of translating. So Jerome doesn't really want to bother with the book of Judith, just like a lot of Christians today don't consider it part of the Bible. But he says because the Nicene Council counted it among the sacred scriptures, sure, I'll go ahead and translate it. So this might be proof that a discussion about the New Testament did happen at the Council of Nicaea, and I am willing to admit that this might be a possibility. But I'm going to argue that this is probably not the case, and Jerome is definitely not proof that some big debate went down at the Council of Nicaea about what should go in and what should go out of the Bible. First, we have an argument from silence. No other ancient author talks about this. Jerome is all by his lonesome. Not Theodoret, not Gelasius, not Rufinus, and most notably not the guys that were alive for the council and who attended it, Athanasius and Eusebius of Caesarea. If there was some sort of debate about which books should be in the Bible, you would think one of these guys would have mentioned it. Plus, we have the evidence of the 20 decrees that the Council of Nicaea published. No mention of a debate about canonical texts. No mention in the council epistle condemning Arius either that we find in Theodoret. So I think that there are several possibilities here given Jerome's statement that are more likely. I think it is more probable that Jerome is mistaken and might be thinking about another council. The Council of Laodicea, for example, occurred 30 years later at a nearby city, and this council actually did publish an official list of what should go in the New Testament. Or another possibility, let's give Jerome the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the book of Judith was discussed at the Council of Nicaea, but does this statement really imply a debate or an official decree? He simply implies that the council members had an idea what was sacred and what was not. Judith might have been quoted or mentioned in passing, but didn't necessarily feature in some broader discussion about what should be in the Bible. So this is where the work of a historian comes in. I can't be 100% certain, but the fact of the matter is Jerome is all by himself, and it's his word against the word of a bunch of other ancient authors, including 2 authors that were there at the council itself. I'm going to follow the evidence. The vast bulk of our ancient evidence says that the Council of Nicaea was about the controversy of Arius, and not about a discussion what should go in the Bible. So let's set this digression aside and ask the question, why did this rumor become so popular? I really don't think Jerome is to blame. A lot of scholars don't even know about that quote. Who is to blame are big name writers that popularized this theory, such as Dan Brown. Dan Brown, author of the Da Vinci Code and a huge pain in the neck for early Christian scholars everywhere. I guess I should be thankful that he wrote the Da Vinci Code. It made my subfield very popular for about a year. But it is kind of annoying to undo all of his historical inaccuracies, and this one in particular hits me right here. In his novel, Dan Brown propagates this idea that the New Testament canon was formed by Emperor Constantine and ratified at the Council of Nicaea. This is nothing short of a complete fabrication. I've said this before in another video, but the formation of the canon was an organic process, and no single authority and no single council officially decided once and for all what should go in the Bible. And Emperor Constantine really had nothing to do with this. Remember, Theodoret records a letter from Constantine reporting about the Council of Nicaea, and he talks about a debate about when we should celebrate Easter. Nothing about the Bible. But this rumor goes back even further. Voltaire, the famous Enlightenment philosopher and writer from the 18th century, apparently believed the Council of Nicaea chose the New Testament too. In his book, The Philosophical Dictionary, he records a kind of weird story, how all the bishops put a big stack of books on an altar, and whatever books fell off the altar should not be included in the Bible. This is a pretty weird story, but it goes back even further. In a very obscure Byzantine text called the Synodicon Vetus, which is a list of all regional councils from the early church to 886 CE, the text says that the council decides on the biblical canon in a very similar way. The canonical and apocryphal books, the council distinguished in the following manner. In the house of God, the books were placed down by the holy altar. Then the council asked the Lord in prayer that the inspired works be found on top, and as in fact happened, the spurious on the bottom. So this sounds a little bit like the story that Voltaire records, so this shows that the rumor stretches all the way back to the 9th century. But scholars don't find the Synodicon Vetus very reliable. The author was basically making up things and embellishing older stories. So it's safer to conclude that this is a fabrication or some sort of rumor that was floating around in the early medieval period. So we have this very strange historical problem, where the texts closest to the event, the texts written by the guys who actually attended the council and who wrote about it a few decades afterwards, they don't say anything about the Council of Nicaea voting on which books should go in the Bible. They say the council was about the Arian controversy. But starting with Jerome and going through the Byzantine period, up to Voltaire, all the way up to the 21st century, some sort of rumor was started that the council decided on the Bible. But the repetition of a rumor does not make it true. I'm going to side with our earlier evidence and say that the Council of Nicaea did not discuss the canon, and it definitely did not publish some official decree led by Emperor Constantine. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. The formation of the biblical canon was a long and complicated process. The scholar Bart Ehrman says it well when he says the canon of the New Testament was ratified by widespread consensus rather than by official proclamation. So banish any thought that the Council of Nicaea decided on the New Testament. Almost every shred of our historical evidence says that the Council of Nicaea was about the Arian controversy. We know this from Eusebius, Athanasius, Theodoret, Gelasius, and we know this from some other authors I didn't even mention, like Socrates Scholasticus, Sozomen, and Rufinus. Yes, we have one sentence from Jerome that might suggest a discussion about the canon occurred, but this doesn't say anything about an official decree, it doesn't prove that some debate occurred, and it certainly doesn't negate the fact that the Arian controversy was front and center at the Council of Nicaea. So next time someone says the Council of Nicaea decided on the Bible, next time someone says Emperor Constantine decided which books should go in and which books should go out, you'll know what to say. No, that council was about the Arian controversy. And then you should share with them this video. Let's end this rumor once and for all. As always, thanks for liking and subscribing, and thanks especially to our patrons on Patreon for keeping this show alive. If you'd like to make a monthly donation to Religion for Breakfast, check out our Patreon page. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.